Hey folks, Psychiatrist here with a quick guide on how to do basic DPS as a Frost Death Knight in 6.2. Now, this is not meant to be the all-encompassing guide on how to be the top mythic Death Knight in the world. There's already a lot of detailed theory crafting out there that you can read through, but this is more intended to be, hey, I'm starting out as a Frost DK. I'm seeing other Frost Death Knights doing better DPS than me. What am I doing wrong? Where am I wasting my DPS potential as a Frost Death Knight? So let's think of this as common pitfalls to avoid, because there's already tons of great data out there about things that you should be doing. It's easy to read all of this great information. What's harder is to avoid the common mistakes. So first of all, if you haven't already read them, go to summonstone.com, read the Frost Death Knight guides that Skullflower puts out there. Amazing information. It'll really help you get started to understand the class and what your goals are. But what this guide should help you do is supplement that to say, here's the places you might do the wrong thing. Here's the things to avoid doing. So read summonstone.com or Icy Veins. Skullflowers actually wrote kind of a different format for the prioritization of the rotation as well. Another great thing to read. So really good details there. Make sure you got the right gems, enchants, talents, all that. Then it's actually time to go and hit your target. Now, the first thing you should be doing, Death Knight is a class that you really need to be tracking your resources. So really important, if you want to get the best you can, the best performance you can do out of the class, you're going to need to go and either make sure you have clear visibility into your resources, that means your runes and your runic power, or you should do what I recommend and what a lot of others recommend is download an add-on called Compact Runes. I'm going to come up here and auto attack for a second just to light this up a little better. So Compact Runes puts your rune pairs front and center, tracks your diseases, and it shows you your runic power. And your procs as well, of course. So you see I've got a killing machine proc. I've got all my rune pairs up. I've got no runic power. Now, the first thing to know about how we spend resources is runes regenerate in pairs. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to go ahead and spend 2 runes right now on Howling Blast. Notice they're not both regenerating. These frost runes, one has to come up, and then the other has to regenerate as well. So that's going to be an important thing to keep in mind and to watch is what runes we have available and what runes are coming available soon. Because this is where we're going to potentially lose out on DPS is if we misspend our runes. What do I mean by that? So I'm going to back up for a second. The most common example that I see of wasted potential is using Obliterate just because it's available and not looking at what runes you're about to spend on that ability. What I mean by that is Obliterate uses 2 runes. It uses an Unholy rune, and it uses a Frost rune. That's a very expensive cast for us. That's 2 runes versus Howling Blast is a single Frost rune, right? So I could get 2 abilities out with two runes, or I could get 1 ability out with 2 runes. Now, you may say, but that's an Unholy and a Frost, and that's just a Frost. Well, that's where the death runes come into play. My death runes are shown in gray here because I'm weird, but if you download Compact Runes, they'll show up as purple by default. And these death runes can be used as anything. They're your jack of all trades, right? They're your wild cards. So the thing you want to avoid doing is spending 2 death runes on an Obliterate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to Obliterate twice to get rid of my 2 Unholy runes. Then I'm going to Plague Leech, and I'm going to refill those. So Plague Leech gives me back 2 death runes once I've depleted some runes. So first thing I'm going to do is get a disease on this target. I recommend running Necrotic Plague. Again, this is meant to be a starter guide. The easiest way to do good DPS to start out with is going to be to grab Necrotic Plague. Really simple to manage this disease. It spreads on its own. It stacks up on its own. It stacks up as you as you Howling Blast. It adds a stack to the disease and makes it stronger. So really, really easy. Just get this thing going, get it hitting everything, and does a ton of damage. Really fantastic ability. So it also makes so you don't have to track 2 different diseases. So that's important because when I Plague Leech, you have to have all of your diseases for however you're running your class. When you're running Defile or Breath of Sindragoso, you have to keep 2 diseases up. When you're running Necrotic Plague, only 1. So 1 less disease to worry about. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to Outbreak, I'm going to Obliterate, and then I'm going to Plague Leech to get back the runes that I've spent. So you'll see the inputs that I press going by right here next to my action bar. So let's close that. You're gonna see me outbreak, run up, obliterate, ignore the killing machine. I'm gonna pull those runes back, or pull that disease off with my plague leech. Now look what I've done. I have replaced one of my unholy runes with a death rune. So I now have 1, 2, 3, 4 death runes, a frost rune, and an unholy rune. What does that mean? I've got a couple options. I could potentially do 5 Howling Blasts right now. Okay, I'd rune cap if I did that, but I could do 5 Howling Blasts with some Frost Strikes mixed in if I've got some killing machines, or if I'm about to cap on my runic power, meaning get to 100 runic power. Or, if I misspent this, I could do just 3 obliterates, right? So I could walk up here, obliterate. Oh, look, if I obliterate right now, I'm only spending death runes. Look, 2 death runes, I could spend obliterate right now. That's where you're going to waste potential DPS, is not using your runes optimally. So Death Knight is really not a class that you can just go by, well, whatever I have available is what I should be pressing. Because there will be times throughout your rotation, let's see, I'll spend that killing machine appropriately. So I'm spending my killing machines well right now. When these two light up, if both are available, I want a Frost Strike. I'm just going to try and get rid of... Okay, so here we go. I just got rid of all of my runic power. This would be a time where I can use Obliterate. Look, Obliterate is going to spend an unholy rune, and it's going to consume a killing machine. That's a good thing. Oh, look, and it happened to proc a rhyme for me. When you spend Obliterates, you sometimes get a free Howling Blast. That's a good thing. This one I would use on my Frost Strike. And I'm sitting here doing this rotation really slowly, so my runes are recharging throughout. But that is the first pitfall that I see, is wasted DPS because you're spending way too many runes on this very expensive ability called Obliterate, which, if you'd spent those runes as doing 2 Howling Blasts, would do way more damage, especially in an AoE situation. Keep in mind that Howling Blast hits everything within 10 yards for the same amount of damage. If you're coming back to Frost Death Knight from previous expansions or previous patches, it used to not hit everything for the same amount. It used to just do full damage to the main target and less damage to the targets in 10 yards. It does the same amount of damage to everything now. It's amazing. It's fantastic. Thank you, Blizzard. Now, let's take advantage of that and AoE like crazy. So we want a Howling Blast. Like, if you keep doing it, you're going to win something, hopefully some loot. Now, why is that important? Because, oh my gosh, have you looked at Hellfire Citadel? There's so many fights that are involving multi-targets. Hellfire Assault, oh my gosh, ads everywhere. Cormrock, hands everywhere. Hellfire High Council, cleave fight. Kilrog, get your raid leader to let you go into the other realm and top the meters. Shadow Lord Iskar, during the second phase, ads galore. Sokrathar, he's okay. Zul'Harak, basically they sat around and said, let's design a class, or let's design a fight where it would be beneficial to just only bring Death Knights as melee. So, I mean, you still need some range out there, but if you're bringing melee, just make it all Death Knights. That's pretty much what they said. So my point being, Howling Blast is going to add so much more damage, especially in AoE situations. You get 2 casts off with 2 death runes versus that Obliterate, which is just 1 cast, hits 1 target, and uses 2 runes. So that's the first thing. The other thing is just not keeping your stuff on cooldown. So moving on to the next tip, right? First 2 tips were track your resources and make your decisions based on what's available. The next one is, as you're tracking those resources, make sure you don't use 2 death runes to cast Obliterate. You should instead be using those on Howling Blast. And then the next one is to keep your cooldowns on cooldown. What do I mean by that? That Pillar of Frost is up every minute. Make sure you keep that guy pressed. And your Plague Leech is up every 25 seconds. That's a great way to get runes back, like you saw me do a minute ago. So I'm going to put my disease on this target. You know, I'm casting, spending runes here. I can Plague Leech right now. I got runes depleted. I can get those back. So that's going to be the first part. No, I didn't do a good example. I didn't Pillar of Frost there. So keeping those on cooldown, making sure you have as many resources as you can in that regard. The next thing is you're going to want to make sure that you optimize your Frost Strike usage. Frost Strike is one of our hardest-hitting single-target abilities. Well, it is our hardest-hitting single-target ability, and we want to use that for Killing Machine procs. So every time that Killing Machine procs up, ideally, we'd like to use that like this. We'd like to use that on a Frost Strike. However, if this happens, right here, look at this. I don't have enough to do a Frost Strike. Don't sit here and wait. Don't blast 2 times to generate some runic power so that you can do a Frost Strike. Move on. press Obliterate if you have to. Press Obliterate. Do you see those proc back to back? Look how fast these are procking. Look at them go. Look at that. There's no reason to be waiting around and going, well, I don't want to have to use my killing machine on an Obliterate. You know, that'll ruin my DPS. No. Move on. There's going to be another one. There's always more right around the corner. That's the one thing to take away from it. So, you know, if you can spend it on Frost Strike, you always should. And the way you're going to ensure that that happens and avoid this scenario right here is making sure you're pooling enough runic power so that when these happen, you've got the runic power to spend. So what does that mean? That means as you're doing your rotation, spending some runes, you're building up this runic power. Skullflower recommends in his guides not spending your runic power unless you hit 88 runic power. So right there I was about 86, so now I can start spending again. So look, I've got enough, right? I'm pooling this stuff. Look at this, I've got enough. So in between, I'm not, even though I could Frost Strike, oh, I pressed the wrong one, it'll hit Killing Machine. Even though I could Frost Strike, right now I could Frost Strike, right? No, save it. I'm going to get rid of my Unholy Runes, generate some runic power. Look, I got a Rhyme proc, that's great. Oh, look, now I've got enough ready to go. I'm not spending my blood tabs here. So I'm going to spend some Howling Blast. Oh, I'm getting really full. Oh, perfect. Look at that Killing Machine just lined right up. So that was the third piece. So the first piece was track your resources, make decisions based on what runes you have, not based on what abilities are able to be used, because that you could misspend them. The next thing is avoid doing Obliterates where it's going to spend 2 death runes. And then the next piece is you really want to pool up that runic power so that you hopefully have it available when you get that Killing Machine to spend on that Frost Strike, but you don't want to cap it. So when you get to the high 80s, that's where you can spend one of them and then go back to spend runes, generate runic power, and keep going. And then keeping those cooldowns on cooldown, keeping your Plague Leech on cooldown to get the runes back, and keeping your Pillar of Frost on cooldown. So follow some of those tips. I think you'll see your DPS go up a little bit if you haven't been using those. And let me know how that works for you. If you got any comments or questions, go ahead and put them out in the comments. As I get better geared up during this patch, what I'll be looking to do is kind of say, same idea, but for some of the other ways to play Death Knights. I mean, guys, we're really lucky right now. Death Knight is super strong in so many forms. You know, I focus on Necrotic Plague because it's so easy, but Defile can actually do a little bit more damage as you get the right gear and for the right fights, but it's very dependent upon your tank keeping the things in the right position and not moving them, because you really got to make sure every single tick of that Defile, which, you know, you put it down like Death and Decay, so you need to, you know, put it in one spot. You need to make sure every single tick hits the boss. So if you got a nice stable tank situation, not going to move the ads, not going to move the boss, and you've got the right gear, Defile can be really, 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 really powerful. So you got different ways to play the class, but then you got to manage the 2 diseases, a little bit more advanced. But as you try to get better and better at Death Knight, that's something you can move on to. And then finally, as you get the 4-piece set bonus and the class trinket for Unholy, wow, you can start doing an insane amount of DPS on some of the AoE fights. So, you know, that's the great thing right now. We can play Frost and do good DPS. We can play Frost 2 different ways as dual wield Frost and do good DPS. We can play Unholy and do good DPS. It's entirely dependent upon what your gear is and what playstyle you're most comfortable with and do best at. So we're not being funneled into here's only one way to play the class. Ton of fun right now. Go out there and top the charts. People should have to scroll down to see past all the red on those meters. So thanks again for watching. Let me know what you thought.